Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Saturday morning. I think I'm awake. I hope everybody's doing awesome and having a great Saturday. So I do these streams Saturday mornings for fun. Want to chat with all of you awesome people. Today I'm going to talk about my journey of learning to code and talk about different strategies that I've been playing with along the way to kind of figure out what's the best way to retain the skills that you're learning. So welcome. Let me know in the chat how you're all doing and if the audio and sound is working well. But I hope you're all doing awesome. And if anybody's new watching these streams, like I don't even know if anybody watches these streams, but it doesn't matter. I started learning to code at the age of like 35, 36. And it took me a while. It took me to get like almost 3.5 years to get my first job. I got hired as a React developer for this company called VersaSuite when I was 39. And so I made a lot of mistakes learning to code. One of it, like the biggest mistake I made is trying to learn everything at once. And it was only until I decided to choose one thing, one path, one direction, that's what helped me. So I'm going to talk about, my learning journey, about learning to code, some of the things that I've been finding useful that were helping me to, improve my coding, and talk about continuous imposter syndrome and some of the different strategies that I used in the past, some that worked, some that didn't, and most importantly, what I'm finding out now that I've been working as a developer for a little bit, and things that have been helping me greatly improve my coding knowledge. Would I still consider myself an expert? Probably not, but hey, this is a learning journey. You keep at it. But while we do this, while people are trickling in, let's say hello. Jason is here. What's up, Paul? Happy Saturday. Well, happy Saturday to you. And Tyler's here. Tyler, welcome. He's saying hello, Paul. Well, hello, Tyler. And glad to have everybody here. And while we kind of wait for people to trickle in, let me know, like, are you working on any cool projects right now? And also, because we are going to talk about learning strategies, for improving your coding, let me know some of the learning strategies that you've been using. I do want to keep these streams as a two-way communication. Also, like, I've been experimenting streaming on Twitch. So there's a Coding After 30 Twitch channel. And I don't know, like, what's more useful. I just decided, you know what, let me give it a try. I still prefer like YouTube, but I know some people just like Twitch only. I don't know why. But anyway, I hope you all doing awesome, and let me know in the chat like what you've been working on, what learning strategies you've been using, and we'll get into the talk in a minute. So when I first started, let me just kind of do like a quick story. So when I started learning to code, I realized back in the day, I used to run a martial arts, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school. Due to a lot of industries, I was like, you know what? I need to switch to a career that can allow me to use more of my brain rather than constantly getting beat up. And so I started learning to code, and I was so excited, and I wanted to learn everything all at once. And I kept just learning like C, C++, like Python, Ruby, and all those other things all at the same time, PHP. And I found myself, I wasn't getting anywhere. And Logic Indy saying, hello. Yo, hope everybody's doing great. Personally, I'm making a new little game. Man, I would love to have you on the stream, just kind of like catch up and show all your cool things. And share the link to your YouTube channel. I think like people should see some of the projects you built. It's pretty cool. Pretty cool. Indy is like pretty smart dude. Let's see here. Anish Gupta says, for DSA, how to proceed. I don't even know, like, people give me a lot of credit. They think I'm really smart. I don't, what do you mean by DSA? I'm not sure what that means, DSA, and how to proceed. Let me know. Anyway, so I started learning to code in my mid 30s, 35, 36, and I made a lot of mistakes. And I feel like I could have gotten to job ready much faster. When I say the fastest path, it's probably like 1.5 years, 2 years of like really hard studying. I'm not a big believer in this like 3 months maybe if you go to a boot camp, but they prepare you for a very specific task. And you start applying right after graduating boot camp while that is fresh in your mind. Maybe you'll get hired. Probably can. I heard stories that go both ways. But for me, like, I think you need to put like a good solid year and a half, 2 years of studying to get to a point where you're like, man, I am job ready. But with that, data structures algorithm. Dude, it's Saturday morning. I literally rolled out of bed. That makes sense. And I'll talk about it when I started learning data structures and algorithms, and we will talk about it a little bit in the stream. But great point. Yeah, Anish, thank you. Thank you for letting me know, because I knew that. My brain was just firing slowly. So if I could become a programmer, you too can become a programmer. But here's the thing that I was going to say. There's in US, right? It's not an easy path to become a developer. It takes a lot of work, really hard work, but you can't still, as a self-taught developer, learn and teach yourself to code, build cool things, build up a portfolio through lots of getting out there, talking to people, meeting folks. You could get hired. Where if you are in India, this is what I hear, is that if you don't have a college degree, forget about it. You're not getting hired at all. And I think you need to eventually go for your master's and stuff like that because of how competitive the market is, which is so insane. When if you live in US, this is awesome. A lot of people ask me, like, I'm a self-taught developer. What are my stances on going to college or getting a CS degree? And if I was younger and I was able to, because it's like a 4-year commitment, I'd say if you're young enough and you're able to, definitely go get a computer science degree. If you're not able to, consider, going to a 2-year school and doing something computer related. That way you get the credits for 2 years. After 2 years, you could start applying to jobs, and you get like what they call in US associate's degree. And then after that, while you get hired, you could continue getting your bachelor's in CS. But if you're older, right, sometimes like you have all these commitments, your family, you can't really do that route. So going to a boot camp could be an option. But the most important part is that I do hold like college degrees, and not so much college degrees, but like college experience of going to school, meeting friends, hang out. Very important, path or part of your life, because it's just a lot of social things happen there when you're in college. You meet like cool people, you make friends, you go to parties, you're studying, you're all doing it together. So I highly recommend if you're able to go to college. But if you can't and you have to do the self-taught route, what are the strategies that help me to get and learn to code? So when I was first starting out, and by the way, let me know in the comments anything that you want me to talk more about, and I'll talk about data structures, algorithms, or talk about your path, your journey of learning to code, because I want to have this like a two-way conversation. But when I was learning to code, because I did not have like a structured path, a structured curriculum, I was kind of all over the place, and I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know where to go. And one of my friends who kind of like mentored me, and this would be like my very first tip: find someone, either your friend or online, that you could have regular conversations about coding and talking about what's out there, what's right, what should you be doing? Because as a new beginner learning to code, you literally have no idea. So talking to someone who has been in the industry for a while as a mentor and giving you guidance is important. And my friend Jeff was that for me. And what he said to me is like, listen, Paul, you know what? You're spinning your wheels, you're starting to code, but you're not really getting anywhere. So the first thing he recommended is like, you need a path. You need to know like, where are you going? Like, what are you going to do? And so he told me, why don't you focus on becoming a React developer? And I was like, oh, that's a good idea. And React is obviously still popular, but at the time it was like really like fast growing, and like people hiring React developers, and they still are hiring React developers. So if you're learning React, it's a plus. But he was like, just focus on React and JavaScript and become good enough to be able to build something with React, right? Like a project that you feel comfortable about talking about when you go into interviews. And so that's what I did. And once I committed to that one path, one kind of journey roadmap, I was like, listen, this is what I'm going to stick to. I'm going to forget about everything else. And that's what actually led me to getting my first job and getting hired. And so after a while, and I'll share this with you since I brought it up, but I made a roadmap. And again, this is not set in stone. This is something that you can update to your own liking and use for yourself to kind of if you're starting out. But what I tell people, like, decide like what you want to be, what you want to do. And so I said React developer, and then plan and decide, create a roadmap that you want to follow. So I created kind of like this is what you should know. Okay, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React, how to consume APIs, databases, TypeScript, Git and GitHub, Next.js, and some AI tooling to help you to be productive as quickly or efficiently as possible. And then I outlined like kind of like pick one resource to learn. You don't need like 10 courses on HTML, CSS. You just need one. So take one course on HTML, CSS, take one course on JavaScript, GitHub, React, how to consume APIs, database, preferably Postgres. Forget like MongoDB. In all the 4 jobs that I had since I started working, all of them were working with some sort of SQL database. None of them used Mongo. So if you want to do yourself a solid, start with Postgres databases. There's nothing wrong with Mongo, but you just don't see them in the wild at jobs that are hiring new developers. Learn TypeScript and Next.js, and then be familiar with how to effectively use AI tools and stuff like that. But once you figure out what you want to do, that was like the biggest tip for like a learning strategy. Know what you have to learn, have a path, have a curriculum. And I guess that's the benefit of going to a boot camp. They give you that path. And same thing with the universities. The second thing that I learned, second mistake that I made when I started to code, and let me know in the chat if this is like something you used to do, but when you're starting to code, you're so excited to start doing things in your code editor. So you learn a little bit of code and you're like, I'm going to build a website, and you open VS Code and you start coding. And you start coding and then you write a bunch of code, and then you realize the code that you wrote is trash. Like, I still write a lot of trash code, and you're like, man, like this is dumb. And then you try again, you hit backspace or you delete everything, and then you start again. You start writing code in your VS Code, and you're trying to literally solve a problem by writing code. And that's the mistake. The biggest mistake I learned is that when learning to code, you need to first understand your problem. And so talk about like data structures, algorithms. I'm going to talk about like the beginner's approach first. Algorithm is just a way to solve a problem. It's steps that you take to get to a solution. It doesn't have to be like, super complex that you see on, lead code and whatever. Like, if you can't build a website or a project, I think learning lead code is a waste of your time, right? At least in my opinion. You need to be able to know how to code, how to build something. Like, if you build like 2-3 websites and you're starting, like, when would I suggest to someone start learning algorithms is when you have a good portfolio and you're going out there starting to look for jobs. You're starting to send out your resume, you're getting interviews. That's when you look up the companies, you look up their interview process, and you see like, do they do more whiteboarding or do they do more take-home stuff, right? The reason why I say you should learn how to build something first and not worry about algorithms is because a lot of companies now offer take-home projects that you could do as part of the interview. And so if you can't build anything, you won't be able to do that project, right? Like, you need to understand how to code. And obviously some companies also do the lead code portion or the algorithms. And what I would say is, don't stress about algorithms until you know how to build things. That's like been my personal opinion. And I've been at 4 different companies, and most of the interviews that I had were take-home interviews. Build a project, do this, build this, website that has a back end and a front end and stuff like that. And so I haven't had too many like whiteboarding interviews. So maybe because I'm not applying to FANG companies, right? So, but I still think it's important. So once you're interviewing, find the company that you're interviewing for and figure out the right strategy for you. Is it spending more time on, because they expect you to answer certain data structures, algorithm questions, then spend time on that. If it's building things, understand the technology they use and be able to build a thing. So, but coming back to this algorithm, coming back to this idea of like the second mistake that I was making is like just always trying to, as a beginner, start coding right away. An algorithm is a basic like stepped solution of how to solve a problem, right? So if you're building something like, like a simple algorithm for like a form submission would be like, well, we need to have an input where a person enters their name. When they click their name, that name should be saved into like state. And then before they submit the form, we should have like some sort of validation. And if the thing is valid, we should allow it to submit the form. And that's a simple algorithm. So I think if you're a new beginner, you're starting out, before starting coding in your code editor, which is something I used to do all the time, just start. And it's cool, like when you're exploring things, when you try to build something, it's more important to actually, in your mind, think through what you want to build, right? And take a pen of pencil. Like, I'm sure there's so many different strategies. People write like, spec docs, and then they, do all this other stuff. But simply just write the workflow that you want to happen, right? And understand what are the steps from a user perspective of what they want to achieve in your product. Like if you have like a, I don't know, like a learning management system website, like they need to log in. Well, think of the workflow of what that login process works and write it out in plain English, or as people call pseudocode. And what's interesting now, because of like AI, you literally like asking questions in English. And if you have good pseudocode, you could talk to ChatGPT and ask it to give you some examples and provide some helpful tips. Now, like I'll talk about how I use ChatGPT. It's not to find solutions, because if someone gives you the answer, you're not learning anything. And by the way, I realized I have ADHD just recently, and this is why sometimes I can't focus on things. I start on one topic and go somewhere else. So I'll try to stay focused. But one thing that like just came to mind and already left, because that's how my mind works. But I'm sure it'll come back to me. But okay, this is what came to me. Like if you go and find an answer somewhere, let's move to we'll come back to point number 2, plan your projects. But point number 3 is super important. When you're learning to code, right? If you go on Discord, if you go on ChatGPT, if you go on Stack Overflow, and you just find an answer, and then you're like, oh, great, this works, and you copy paste in the code, you kind of robbed yourself of a learning opportunity, right? And so the best thing you could do, and if you go to our Discord, I work for a company called Strappy we are headless CMS, but when people provide answers, they don't just give you the answer right off, even if they know it. Maybe they don't know, but if they know the answer, they don't give it to you right away. Instead, they point you to the documentation, or they'll help you think through your problem by asking questions to make sure that you come to the answer yourself. So the most important thing for you as learning to code is to be able to understand what the solution is. And the way you understand what the solution is, you think through the problem. And this is what I say, like a simple algorithm of, what is the step for your user to submit the form? Think of all those steps, write it in pseudocode, and understand like what you need to do. And once you have that basic algorithms, right, you now understand what you need to code, and then you go into your VS Code and you start typing the code. That's the most important thing. Like before I get too far, let me say say hello in the chat. So Shiam saying hello, what's up? Hello Shiam, you're the best. All of you are the best. And if you don't think you're awesome, don't smash the like button. But if you think you're awesome, smash the like button. Not for me, for yourselves, because you are like, this stream would not be anything if you weren't here to watch it. You know what I'm saying? So I need a smash button to smash the like for you to like you, because I love all of you. So Anish says, face a lot of problems with Redux and middlewares in React, how they become master. So let me ask you a question, like, so are you using Next.js? Because like if you're using like Create React App, like you probably don't have any middlewares, but if you're using Next.js, yeah, you're doing middlewares. Now, like the question I would ask, like, why do you need Redux? And do you are you doing Redux because someone told you to do Redux, or are you doing Redux because it's a requirement for the project? Because I never touch Redux nowadays, unless it's a company where I work. They're like, hey, we already started building this with Redux. And so I'm like, okay, let's do Redux. And what I would say is that if you don't know, like, if you're doing it because someone said you should like use Redux because it's cool, like don't do it. Try to build your application with normal state management. You could use React context in majority of cases, and then if ever it becomes a problem, then you could switch to Redux. But if you have no reason to use Redux, just don't use Redux. In terms of middlewares, right, it's just continue to practice. And like if pick one, like first I would say if your application doesn't need Redux, don't use Redux. And then if it's middlewares, just like what anybody else does, start just looking up middlewares, and I'm assuming using Next.js, and look up how to work with middlewares in Next.js and stuff like that, and just keep practicing. And That's what I would do. And then she says not being present on stream, but you're doing great. Thanks. So anyway, so being able to think through the code, being able to think through what problem you're trying to solve. So like the point number 3 is like, make sure that you're not coding something that you don't understand what the process of it is. Like if you don't understand in your mind, what are the steps a person needs to take for your code to work, like figure that out first. Have that algorithm, that instructions, write your stuff in pseudocode, kind of understand how it works, and then code. And this is something I wish I learned much faster, because I spent a lot of times coding something in my code editor, getting like halfway through and then being, good Lord. Yeah, Tapas has really good, hey, Shiam, throw the link here to his YouTube channel. He has an amazing YouTube channel. He explains a lot of stuff well there. Thanks for that shout out, Shiam. Yeah, Tapas, amazing. And speaking of that, the next thing that I want to talk about, and actually let me back up here for a second. So something that I want to become better here, and let me share my screen here. And so I talked about like algorithms and pseudocode, and basically algorithms in the most simple way. A lot of people try to overcomplicate it. It's not anything complex. It's basically a set of instructions or steps to solve a problem. An algorithm, by the way, could be not written in code. It could be written in pseudocode. And this is basically what I was saying, like learn to write out the steps of your algorithms in pseudocode before writing it in your code editor. And pseudocode is basically, in plain English, pseudo code language, write the steps that you have to do. And so here's an example of a very simple pseudocode. Let me make the screen bigger. Instruction where it says, this is not real code, but this is just the steps. And it says, set total number members to 0, loop while the input of numbers name is not empty, increment total number of members by 1, output total numbers of members. And I think this is like a really good learning tool, understanding tool, or how to think. And this is something that I wish I would have done more as a beginner, is follow this step. Create an algorithm, basically instructions of steps to solve the problem that I'm trying to achieve, and then rewrite that. What would that look like in pseudocode, like pseudo English, half programming language, not real programming language, but it kind of helps you to think of like, how would you write it in code? And another thing that I don't do, by the way, is this concept of flowcharts. So this is, well, I've done it a couple of times, only when the problem is complex enough, but I want to do it like all the time now, even for simple things, just to get into a habit of creating flowcharts to allow me to kind of think better through the process. And I've done some in the past application I've been working, but I'll share this article here for anybody who's interested to check it out. But you could check it out. I don't know. They're always like trying to sell you stuff. I'm like, sell flowcharts. You don't need a paid flowchart maker thingy. But the basic idea is that you write out your logic using flowcharts. And here it like kind of shows the if-else kind of flow of things here. And so this allows you to visually see what your code is doing. So I would say explore, learn about flowcharts, the benefits of using flowcharts. And I think as you start working on more complex projects, I think this is something that's going to help you stay focused and having a path and having like a better understanding of what you're trying to code. So like I said before, my biggest issue starting to code as a beginner was that I was always starting in my VS Code editor and just typing a bunch of nonsense and then trying to figure things as I go along. And there's a place to explore and experiment, but when you're trying to do something, what I would suggest you do and the steps that you do, and don't overthink it. Don't think of like super complex algorithms that you see on LeetCode, but think of like the most basic steps that someone should take. So remember, algorithms is nothing complex. They can be complex, but it's basically a set of instruction steps to solve a problem. Like for instance, I'll give you an algorithm, how to make a peanut butter jelly sandwich. This is what they show us a good example in that CS50 course. It's like, take a piece of bread, take a knife, put knife in peanut butter jar, scrape peanut butter, put the knife with peanut butter over the piece of bread, put the peanut butter on the bread. And so that's an algorithm, right? And then what you would do is, once you understand your steps of your algorithms of how to solve the problem, go ahead and write it in pseudocode, right? Write it in pseudo English/code language that doesn't exist, the steps that your program would need to take to accomplish the step. And once you have your pseudocode as a practice, go ahead and write out a flow chart. And you could just Google how to write flow charts. That will give you an example of how your code works and what does it do. Here's like a better overview of what a flowchart is, because they'll help you to understand the problem that you're trying to solve. And once you have those three things, right? Once you have your algorithm to solving the problem, like I said, it could be just as basic as making a peanut butter sandwich. Once you have the pseudocode, by the time you get to this flow chart, you have a really good understanding of what you're trying to accomplish. And then you will go ahead and write your code, right? Then you would write your actual code because you know what you're trying to accomplish. So that's like tip number 3, is to make sure you understand the problem that you're trying to solve. And let me take a look here. Anish saying, thank you to Shiam. Hey, this is why I love the chat. Smash the like for the chat, helping each other out. Super awesome. Shekhar saying, what is the most effective approach to learning programming and securing a job rapidly? So they're like, I like when people say rapidly, because it just will take you as long as it will take you, because you like, I used to go to interviews. I was like, I'm too old. That's why nobody's hiring me, because I was like in my late 30s when I was going to interviews. But I realized it's not that I was too old, it's that I didn't know enough. I just was saying to myself, I'm too old. But like, you need to learn the bare minimum that the company is looking for you in terms of skills. But in terms of learning to code, like the most effective approach, I would say for me is stop doing too many tutorials. That's the biggest waste of my time is I did way too many tutorials, and I've been doing tutorials nonstop forever and ever. And the issue I had with doing tutorials, after I'm done with the tutorial, I would have a project. But if you asked me to build that project from scratch, I wouldn't be able to make it. So this is what I learned is like, hey, forget the tutorials. Actually start coding. So the approach that I just showed you, figure out the problem that you're trying to solve, and literally start practicing coding projects from scratch. That is the most effective approach to learning programming, which I was going to talk about. And why not talk about now? Thanks, Shikara, for bringing that up. So the most effective approach to learning to code is learning to code. So I used to like work with kids, and kids like to teach kids about like practice and how practice makes you better. I would say, like, if someone practices eating ice cream all the time, what are they going to be good at? Well, they're going to be good at eating ice cream. What if someone practices doing push-ups all the time? What are they going to be good at? They're going to be good at practicing push-ups all the time. What if someone practices taking tutorials all the time? Well, they're going to be good at taking tutorials. And what if someone practices building things from scratch all the time? Well, guess what? They're going to be good at building projects from scratch. The reason why a lot of people don't practice building things from scratch is because when they start their first project, they realize, wow, this is so hard. I can't do this. This is dumb. I think I don't know enough. I need to go and do more tutorials, which is a mistake. That's a mistake, and don't do it. The reason why building things from scratch is hard is because you've never done it before. That's why it's hard, and you have to push through it. You have to try to always step out of your comfort zone when learning new things. And so the most effective way to get to job ready is actually building things as often as you can and practicing the actual skill of coding. And tutorials are not it, right? You just need to learn through trial and error. And that would be the fastest way of getting there, and the fastest way of doing is building things and building things from scratch. I had another point I was going to make that was important, but it flew into one year, flew out the other year, spun around and just disappeared. But when it gets there, I'll get there. But yeah, Jason is agreeing with me. And I'm telling you, listen, I'm some random dude on the internet here. I'm not like a guru developer. I still suffer from imposter syndrome. What I'm telling you, when I'm telling you that is the fastest way to learn to code, I mean, it is what it is. You don't have to believe me or not. There's no secret magic bullet. It's by building things. So a second tip that I'm going to give you, there's so many like tips that I have, and they're not in a particular order. But another tip I'm going to give you is actually look at other people's code, like read code. And so if you're starting out and you might not even understand what people are doing, but like what I would do is, let's say you want to build a tree drop-down component in React. Like, go look at how Material UI did it, right? It's all that stuff is on GitHub, and see how they did it. I'll show you like at Strappy, we have a design system. Strappy, I can't spell P, design system. I'm just going to show you this by example here. Like how to, and a lot of companies have something similar, like Material UI, all the stuff. All the stuff is like open source, right? So check this out. My God, this dark theme is not doing anything for me right now. Hold on. Okay, so we have this design system. I'm just going to show this as an example. So this is another great strategy to learn code. So we have like an accordion component. We have, okay, avatar, we have button, we have carousel input. You're like, okay, this is great. We have checkboxes. You could find all these like simple, like, grid layout, empty state layout here, right? And you can find, let me see, like text button theme, text area, right? So the idea is you could find a bunch of libraries that are open source, and all of them will have like this idea where you like they'll show you the docs, but more importantly, they have this thing called view source code. And if you're in github.com, if you click period, it will open up in VS Code. And what you could literally like, hey, this is like, I'm trying to learn how to build this component. Go ahead and look it up and see, how to build. Like, I think I hit period in like the wrong area there. Let me go back here. I just wanted to show you, not index, but text area input. So you could literally see the underlying code of all these different things. So if you're looking how to build a text area, or like you want to build a tree dropdown, go ahead and start looking at the code and see what they're doing. And then try to, once you see the code, there's nothing wrong with copying. And Jericho, thanks. I never get super chat, so this is amazing. Thank you. Yeah, ask your question whenever you get a chance in the chat. I'll get to it. But there's nothing wrong with copying and learning through copying. Like if you don't know how to do, like when you're learning how to play soccer, or like, or you're playing it like badminton, some sort of sport, you have to watch a coach show you that movement, and you copy that movement before you learn more deeper understanding of it through the practice of doing it. So go look at people's code and then see if you could recreate it by copying the code. Like go in your editor, like see what they're using, like check out like the packages. Like I think they're using style components here to style. Yep, they are to style, their CSS, and then you could see like how they're building these components, and then try to recreate it. Do that with Material UI. You find something cool in Material UI. Tree dropdown is such a cool component because like it could get pretty complex. Learn how to create it. So you like Material UI also, I think, is open source. What is it called? MUI, Material Design. Yeah, like you could go to Material UI. You could go to their GitHub. It's on GitHub, I'm pretty sure. And you find a cool component. Like, how the hell did they build this, component? And look it up in the code. Look at the source code. That's what I would say. Another great tip learning to code is don't be shy looking at source code. If you don't understand it, go ahead and try it out. Build it like by copying. And Jericho, ask your question. Okay, in my pursuit, here you go. In my pursuit to becoming a full stack developer in 2023, how can I ensure that I am learning only the skills that will use for me in the future? Can you give me the proper roadmap? In my pursuit to become full stack developer in 2023, how can I ensure that I'm learning only the skills that will be useful to me in the future? Can you give me? So that's such a tough question to answer. And what I would say is, the way I do it, so there's no like right or wrong approach, but the way I do it is I look at the company that I want to work for, or the 2-3 companies that I want to work for, and I look at the technologies that they're using, and I'll use my company as an example. So for instance, my company, they build a headless CMS. By the way, if you ever want to create an API really quickly, go to strappy.io and check out Strappy. I'm just going to do a selfless plug here. It allows you to create an API within or a whole headless CMS content management system, but you could also use it as an API basically in literally 3 minutes. It's super awesome. I use it for all my projects. But coming back to Jericho's question here is, I look at the companies that I want to work for and I see the tech that they're using. So in our case here, I needed to know Node.js. I needed to know JavaScript. I needed to know React. I needed to know for our backend language, we actually use Koa.js. So I needed to be comfortable with Koa, GraphQL. And so in whatever pursuit you're trying to achieve, find the technologies that you need to learn and focus on those, because you can't learn everything. Nobody has enough time to learn everything. And so for your full stack role, look at 2-3 companies that you want to get hired and see the most common technologies that they're using and just focus on those in order to get hired. I hope that answer helps. And for me, I started more with for me, my thought, Jericho, is always it's easier to get a job as a front-end developer. And I do have this roadmap for that. But what I'm saying, is this an exact science for a roadmap that you can use? But I'll just show you my logic here, what I did. And I'll share this in the chat again. You could check it out. And you could kind of copy this and create your own roadmap of the things that you want to learn and to pursue. So for me, break into the industry, what I decided, I'm going to just focus to become a React developer. And the way I'm going to achieve this is the things that I have to know. And I updated this recently, but you need to know HTML, CSS, and Sass, JavaScript, React, how to consume and work with APIs. You need to be comfortable with SQL databases. You don't have to be a master, but you have to understand the basics of what they are, how you query data in the most basic sense, and how that applies to this whole idea. That's what an API does. It queries data from a database and returns it to you via JSON. So just be familiar with those general stuff. You need to learn TypeScript in my case. You need to be comfortable with Git and GitHub. If you're learning to become a front-end developer, you need to know a framework. I say Next.js all the time. Next.js is not my favorite framework. My favorite framework is Remix Run. That's my favorite front-end framework. For beginners though, I do say, learn Next.js because it's fairly popular and everybody's doing it. But what I would say is create your own roadmap, Jericho, that you need to follow to get to where you want to go, and just replace this with the technologies that you need for full stack. But for me, I am in the process of shifting to becoming a full stack developer. But I started as a straight up front end developer. Hope that helps. If you have any follow-up questions, let me know. Yeah. And so talking about learning to code, I forgot where I left off. Answering the questions, we talked about thinking through your code. We talked about looking at other people's code. Yep. So we talked about looking at other people's code and then copying that code. And we used an example of, you find a cool material UI component, you just find the code in GitHub, see how you do it, and you try to recreate it how you can, because there's so many open source projects out there, so you could just look at other people's code. Another great way to practice, and this is something I wish I started earlier, but I didn't, another way of learning, this will 100% improve how to think as a programmer and how to solve problems. And I suck at this, but I'm going to kind of share it with you. This is something that I started to do more of. There's plenty of open source projects. So if you want to get a real life experience, what I would say is get your hands dirty and try to solve some of these things you find in open source. So I'll use Strappy as an example again. So here I'm on Strappy's GitHub. You go to issues. We have a bunch of issues here. And so you will find some interesting issues. And in most cases, in a lot of places, if you look at labels, there's going to be a label called good first issue. Somewhere in there's a label called good first issue. I just trust me on this. If I find it, is it a label or is it a issue? It's somewhere in here. We have a lot of issues. Just so a lot of repos will have first good issue, and if they don't, it's okay. Don't worry about it, because I don't think we have any first good issues at the moment, or maybe we're not putting that label. I don't know. I'm gonna have to talk to the team, I hope. But you could go through issues and you could start looking at them. And so this might be pretty intimidating though, right? You're like, I don't even know how to do this thing. So like become familiar with, like, for instance, I'm just gonna use Strappy because Strappy, this is like the repo min. So become familiar with the product or the service that they're providing and use it. And that way, when using it, you could see the code because you're building things with it. So like the way I started with Strappy is I started using Strappy for my project, and I started getting into the code, and then I started being familiar with Strappy over time. You know, I'm on Strappy Discord. I'll talk about joining communities in just a second. And so now, once I got basic familiarity, but I'm still intimidated. I'm still intimidated doing issues. So there's a majority repos that you find, they will have status called cannot reproduce, or not reproduce, cannot reproduce. It's not cannot reproduce. It's pending reproduction. Like a lot of GitHub repos will have this pending reproductions. And let me tell you why this is a good first place to start. And also, if you have any other tips, let me know in the chat. But why this is a good place to start, this was going to help you to start using your brain to kind of think of how to solve problems. So maybe like, and there's no risk to you, right? And so pending reproduction, this is, I think, is the best first step. So for instance, let me see, wrong relation when clicking inside a record, but okay when clicking on the index. And so you could look at the, oh, I clicked the wrong button. Let me go back. Go back. Oh, go forwards. No, hold on. Issues. My gosh, I can't click. Pending reproduction. So, right. So, okay. So you find an issue, pending reproduction, you click on it, and what good bug report or a good issue would have, it would have the steps of how to reproduce the issue. And so, can I get initial setup page to load when using this issue screen? Is very similar to comes up in the newest version of Strappy. So this is a terrible ticket, in my opinion, because he didn't show the steps of how to reproduce the item. By the way, a lot of times if you find an issue somewhere and go on attention, let's say it's a bug report. Open. Okay, what am I doing? New issue. Bug report, get started. So a lot of times they will say, hello, thank you for submitting an issue. Before you start, please make sure the issue is understandable and reproducible. And so you do your bug report, you talk about the basic information that's very helpful, you describe the bug, and the most important step, give the steps to reproduce the behavior of the issue. And so that's why the thing that I showed you, it showed the bug, but it didn't show you how to reproduce the bug, right? So that doesn't help anybody trying to solve and help with things. And Jericho, I'll get to your question in a second. That's a very good question. And going back to like issues here, once you find an issue, just to kind of make things quick to finish up this point, pending reproduction is, so here's a good bug submission. So they show you the issue, they show you the thing, and then, okay, they don't show you how to reproduce it either. Maybe, oh, actually this is showing you what the issue is and reproduce it on the bug. But once you find it, is find the issue to, like, see, it says pending reproduction. You don't want the core team constantly, you want to help the company out, right? And this is a good way for you to do it, is go ahead, see if you could reproduce this issue. And once you reproduce the issue, create a thing here. I have reproduced the issues. I can't type fast, so I'm just going pretending. I reproduced the issues. Here are the steps I did it, and this is verified, and click comment to let the developers know, like, hey, yes, this is an actual issue because this is reproduced by users. And so that's an easy way for you to get started thinking about problems. What's interesting though, once you do a bunch of these, you'll be like, okay, so I could reproduce the issue. The next step would be like, let me look at the code here. So find this in the code base, figure out why it's causing this, and see if you can figure out or not. And if you can't figure out, that's irrelevant, right? The most important part there is that you went ahead, you dove into the code, and you started using your thinking process of being like, well, what could be an issue here? Why doesn't it work? And you might run into like a challenge of like, I don't even understand what this code is. So you back up, you break into smaller chunks, you start working through code line by line to improve your understanding of the code, and you're learning. But the way it's called active learning, because you're actively using your brain to solve a problem. And this is what I would say. Passive learning is where you're watching a tutorial, you're watching a video, or you're reading a blog. Active learning is when you are going through the code and you actively trying to fix something, and you learn through that process. And this is like the super secret tip. Like if you want to learn faster, start trying to apply your problem solving abilities. And like a muscle, is going to be hard at the beginning, right? I mean, it's going to be weak at the beginning. You're going to have a hard time, but through practice, practice, and practice, you're going to get there. So what I would say here is, don't be shy looking at other people's code, trying to solve issues. And if you can't, that's perfectly fine. So try to reproduce issues like I showed. But once you find an issue, and once you're able to like, oh man, I think I know what the fix is, now you could do a pull request with your fix. And, and if your fix, you might get some comments back like, hey, you didn't think about this, blah, 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 blah. Or you might get a comment, oh, thanks, this actually works. We're going to merge your pull request. Thank you for your help. And so you're applying your skills in a real way level. So working and contributing to open source projects is a great way to continue learning. So let me come back to Jericho's question. Should I learn MySQL or MongoDB or both? I would say stick to MySQL databases. So I've had 4 jobs. Literally all of them use SQL style databases. Nobody used MongoDB. I know there's a lot of learning tutorials that teach you Mongo. I just would avoid them because you're not going to be using Mongo in majority of your like real work projects. A lot of companies use SQL type of databases. Like my past 2 companies that I worked at, they use Postgres. So familiarize yourself with working with SQL type of databases for sure. But I know there's so many projects like learn how to build this with MongoDB or Firebase. It's all good, but it's not useful because none of those technologies are listed on job applications. So like right now, go look at job applications. You'll see majority of them showing Postgres SQL style databases. That's what I would say. And then Jason saying, if you are intimidated, you can set up GitHub with your personal project and create issues for yourself. For sometimes simple, like create new bar, practice working with branches and pull requests. And that is a very, very good tip, right? Start slow. Learn to walk before you sprint or fly or whatever, like teleport. So another thing that I would say is, I know, like, by the way, like while I'm wrecking my brain here, thinking about stuff, go ahead, ask some questions in the chat. Let me know what it is and what you want me to talk about, because I might try to have myself answer your questions. And so the reason why I want to say stay away, so let me like back up here. Let me hold on, let me look at the chat here. Anything? Okay, yeah. So let me talk about this. So this is why I say get out of tutorial hell as quickly as you can. This is why I stream Friday night stream, where I painfully try to live code and fail miserably. I don't care that people make fun of me. It's more designed to force me to practice coding more and building things more. And I've been doing it like for a bit now. And so like I always love starting things from scratch. I recently built a pretty cool extension which allows you to summarize short videos into blog posts, right? I've never built an extension before, but I was like, let me learn how to build extensions and let me like learn how to do like whatever and blah, 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 blah. And so I was like, let me build that code extension, learning something cool. So practice building stuff from scratch. Get out of like tutorial hell. There's, that's the worst thing you could do. If you took 5 coding tutorials, that's enough for trust me, it's enough. Start building stuff from scratch. And by the way, if you look at my roadmap, the way my roadmap is set up, you will never be stuck in tutorial hell. Let me share that for a second. So if you look at my roadmap, and I'll share it in the chat. By the way, if you ever want, I have a community that I'm trying to like participate more in. If you want to join our community, I hate Discord, I'll be honest, but I have a Coding After 30 community that you can join. I'm trying to be more active on this. Also, the best way to join, if you want to, is I created a website just for that because I'm too lazy to build it. Like, I have so many ideas, I can't build everything. But if you go to codingafter30.com, I have to update, this text means nothing, but enter your name, enter your email address, and a GitHub repo link, and join our community. They'll send me a thing to invite you, and I'll invite you if you're interested. But coming back, so I made this roadmap, and this roadmap literally, if you follow this, you will never be stuck in tutorial hell because, hey, Sharon, what's up? Because the way it works. And so once you have one course, step 1, complete the course. Right? Only, for HTML, CSS, you only need one course. Complete it fully, build all the projects within the course, push it to GitHub. And this is the main part. Before moving to a next course, build a project from scratch based on what you learn. So do not go to another course until you build your first project from scratch, even if it sucks, right? You need to learn. So I used to have this mantra: learn, apply, achieve. Learn, apply, achieve. Take a thing, learn it. I learn HTML from one course, and then I need to apply the knowledge proactively, active learning, building a project. Once you build a project, regardless if it sucks or not, who cares? You could always refactor and make it better. Then you move on to your next course. And if you follow that process, you will never be in tutorial hell, ever. And so, in order to continue to learn, to grow as a programmer, like, you need to practice in like active learning. So passive learning, like I described, is doing a tutorial. Even if you're coding along with a tutorial, that's passive learning, right? You need to do active learning, which is basically engage in hands-on activities to help you understand through making mistakes what you're doing. And so this is why I say building things from scratch is super duper important, like really, really important. And then focus practice, by the way, is also important. It's like a lot of times we try to build things like really randomly. And so I was building something and I needed to understand how to download videos to my backend and how to transcribe it. So I only focused on that, like figuring how to do that. And once I learned how to do that one particular task, I created 3 different apps that do the same thing. So all I needed to do is how do I get a video from YouTube, download it to my local server, and then send it to transcription service, transcribe it, and then summarize into a blog post. So that's like what I was learning. I only focused on that thing. But once I did my initial project, I made like a node script that does that. Then I applied that same thing to a command line interface tool. So we made a CLI tool that does the same thing. And then I also took that same knowledge and I applied it to my Chrome extension. So I have a Chrome extension that I built that will summarize questions of your short videos. So, which is kind of cool. And so basically focus practices, don't try to be all over the place. Have a thing like a problem that you're trying to solve and really focus on just doing that until you understand it, right? Until you solve it. And once you solve it and you kind of get an idea of like, I get it, I know how it works, build something based on that knowledge. And the most important thing for me, this is why I stream on Friday nights, like something that's going to help you. Like when you're doing tutorials, like you're having opportunity to make your own mistakes, right? Like, so build things from scratch, and you're going to fail. You're going to find issues. Things going to break, but don't be afraid to make mistakes. Debugging your own code will teach you how to ask proper questions to figure out solutions to your problems faster. You could reflect on the mistakes, on the errors that you see. And if you don't know an error, you could go ahead and look them up. I'll show you how I use ChatGPT. I don't use it to give me a solution. I use it as my partner to help me talk through a problem, right? And then understand like the problem. Build cool things. And a lot of times, like, we get too hung up, and this is me for a while, and I do have like 3 initial projects that you should build, but in between, like, if you want to kind of practice cool things, like, I'll show you like the thing that I did here, demonstrate here. So I built this like extension, which you're able to take a short video from YouTube and paste the URL, summarize video, and it's going to basically the steps I just outlined is going to download this video to my server, convert it to an audio file. It's going to send that audio file to Whisper AI, an API on OpenAI. Then it's going to transcribe it. Then it's going to take that transcript and send it to OpenAI text completion, which is going to, based on my prompt, summarize the video into a blog post. And the reason why it's taking some time is because it's doing all those things. And here you see the summary of a blog post, which is kind of short, which is fine, based on this short YouTube video. So building things from scratch, super, super important. Let me come back before we get on to the point. So Jericho says, what are some common mistakes that beginners, web developers make, and how they can be avoided? The first mistake is trying, like, and I mentioned this at the beginning of the stream, I'll reiterate, and these mistakes cost me years of getting my first job. So I started learning to code at like 35. I got my job at like 39. So almost 3.5, almost 4 years of my journey, which I think, like, realistically, 1.5 to 2 years, you could get the knowledge to be able to get a job. I know some people say 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, hype, BS. I would love to talk to anybody that did that physically face to face, so I could ask them some questions and see if they're BSing me. A lot of times, like the one caveat to that will be, like, I know some bootcamp grads who went to did a bootcamp for like 3 months, and then they were able, or 4 months, they were able to get a job. But that's because it was a very narrow scoped bootcamp, which taught a very specific skill. And that bootcamp had companies that have worked locally that they would pass their grads to. So if you go to that type of bootcamp and you don't wait and you try applying right away, you might get a job. But I also heard like horror stories. So to me, like, the timeline is 1.5 to 2 years to get that knowledge to be like, okay, a competent programmer, I could do this. But the common mistakes is trying to learn everything right at once. So the first thing I would say, decide the one thing that you like, path that you need to learn, and put blinders on. Don't try to learn everything. Try to learn the technologies that you need for that particular job. And like I showed in my example, I wanted to be a React developer. And so I created these blinders. I'm like, this is the only things I'm focusing on. So instead of focusing on everything that I did before, I was like, I'm only going to focus on HTML, JavaScript, React, consuming APIs, basic knowledge of databases, TypeScript, understanding Git, learning Next, and being familiar with AI tools like Copilot and ChatGPT, and learning how to use them to learn how to become a better programmer. So the first mistake is people try to take on too much. Make sure that you narrow your focus and create a path for yourself and stick to it until you get hired. The second mistake, the huge mistake that will rob you of your time that people make, which I mentioned again, is people going and doing tutorials. Like, you can be stuck in tutorial hell for 3 years, 4 years. That's uncalled for. That's terrible. It's going to rob you of your time, and it's going to rob you of your ability to get your first job. Literally, like, if you looked up my roadmap, that's like, 6, 7,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, if you, about 8 courses on Udemy, and they're all different courses. It's not like, let me take 8 HTML, CSS courses. No, it's 8 courses from start to finish to get you job ready. And I'm not saying my roadmap, you should follow it, it's going to work for you. Like, make your own roadmap. You could use it as an outline, but you got to find your own path. But the point that I'm saying is, you don't need bajillion things to do. And the biggest mistake I've had is that I have over like 500 Udemy courses. Don't even ask me how much money I spent. I probably maybe took and completed only 15 of them total, right? But the biggest mistake, people want to think that the next course is going to make them smarter. The course that you're taking is not going to make you smarter. Building projects from scratch is going to make you smarter. The course that you're taking is going to just teach you enough to start building things from scratch yourself. And so being stuck in tutorial hell, biggest mistake people make. And the best way to get out of it is to be like, here's the approach I use to get out of tutorial hell. If you don't do this, you'll never get out of tutorial hell. I don't know what to tell you. Number 1, take that one course, complete it fully. Once you complete one Udemy course, if you go to another course, I should smack you, hypothetically, in theory. Like, no, you don't do that. You're robbing yourself of, like, taking a tutorial is passive learning. If you go and take a tutorial and then you go to another tutorial, you're wasting your time. You need to apply active learning, which is building something based on what you learned. So once you complete your one tutorial, what you need to do is you need to stop what you're doing and build a project from scratch, regardless if it sucks or not, no one cares, based on what you learned, because the learning that happens through that active process is going to solidify the knowledge that you learn and help you to retain it. And only after you build that project from scratch, only then you move to your next Udemy course or your next resource. This is very important. And the third mistake I would say that a lot of beginners make is trying to continue learning everything in a silo and doing everything by themselves. This is why I say going to meetups, meeting other developers, making developer friends. Like, my biggest secret was I literally made, like, when I started learning to code, I like decided what does I used to teach Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, mixed martial arts, right? That was my full-time job, completely different. And all my friends were athletes, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu competitors, MMA fighters, police officers, because that's the world I lived in. When I made the decision to switch to programming, I said, I am going to be a programmer. What lifestyle does a programmer live? And I visualized that. And it's like, what kind of friends does a programmer have? Has programmer friends. So I started making new friends, all of them programmers, because you shouldn't be learning to code in a silo. You want to have friends that you could talk about code. If you can't find friends, I can't sometimes find friends, like, go on Discord and start talking to people on Discord, start having conversations about code. And so don't work in a silo. So one example I would say, and again, I'll use Strappy as example here. We have Strappy Discord server. I hate Discord. Oh god, it's a general Strappy question. So, but the point that I'm trying to make is make friends, go to meetups, get out there. Meetups will help you get hired faster, because every time you go to a meetup, people that organize meetups, they're always looking for people for their company. So you can literally talk to them about it. They'll tell you what you need to know. They'll help you resume. Like, I've never got a job through sending a resume. I always got a job through a referral, which I talked many times. I could talk about it if you want on this video, but I could talk about it in other videos. But the biggest mistake, people try to learn in silo, and they'll go on, and that's just too slow. Like, you need to have people that you could bounce ideas. And this is why I love ChatGPT now, because if you don't have friends like me, you could have pretend friends in ChatGPT to talk about code, which is amazing. But what I would recommend, join programming servers, or if you like a product that you're using, they have their server. Like, I'm going to use Strap as an example, and, participate in the conversations. Oh, I went too far. I thought you could can you make this bigger? Yes. And then they have, like, every server has different things. Like for instance, in our server, we have a thing called open office hours, where you could ask technical questions and we try to help you with the answers. You could also participate in chat. And what's awesome here, like you could see some of these questions that people ask, for instance, and maybe you know the answer, and you could like go ahead and you could be like, let me like jump in and give him a solution, which is, kind of help him out. Like for instance, like, someone asks a question and you could go ahead and give him like, hey, maybe you should check out this. This might be a useful resource for you, blah, blah, blah. And so start talking and participating in conversations with other developers and find places where people like have open office hours. What's cool about the open office hours, like at Strappy, is we have not only people from Strappy there having cool time, but we have other developers that have like really crazy experience of like building cool things. Like yesterday, I literally watched somebody else talk about what they're building. I didn't say a single thing because I was just, wow, I was just soaking up the knowledge of what they were talking about. They were showing like how they have this amazing like microservice infrastructure and why they're doing it and the benefits and the cons. And I was just learning. And then if I had a question, I would ask a question. And so that's the third biggest mistake. Don't try to do things in a silo. Go to meetups, participate in the community, talk with other developers through coding. And this is, by the way, why I love ChatGPT 4. And so to summarize, Jericho's questions were some common mistakes that beginners make. Number one, not having a path, trying to learn too many things. No, get a path of what you want to do and only focus on that path until you get hired. Rewind the video if you want more details. Number two is making sure that you're doing, man, my ADHD is killing me. I'm going to have to rewind the video to figure out what number two is. But basically, don't get stuck in tutorial hell and make sure that you're practicing building projects from scratch to practice not passive learning, but active learning. And number three is get out there, go to meetups, go on Discords, talk to other programmers, make programmer friends. I literally used to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Like I said, I had friends who were, experts, athletes, police officers, MMA fighters. I don't like literally talk to any of them anymore because that's not what I do now. I'm a programmer, so all my friends are programmers now. I don't know, maybe I'm weird, but make programmer friends that you could talk about coding. And to kind of quickly, before we finish up the stream, like I just want to show you how I use ChatGPT. And so like one way, if you get an error that you don't understand, like you could ask and have a conversation about it, with ChatGPT. So here I'm not I had like a weird error, like I wasn't quite sure where it was. And I literally had a conversation with ChatGPT to help me better understand what the error is. And did it offer me solutions to my error? It tried. It miserably failed, but I had a starting point and I kind of understood what I need to do. And after going through this approach, maybe I didn't get the right answer from ChatGPT, which it didn't give me the right answers. All these answers were wrong, but now I knew what not to try. And then it led me to another like kind of path to figure out what the issue was. Another one here, use case, I use ChatGPT. So like I wrote code in the past. So I wrote a code that basically will take a bunch of range of dates. And if there's an overlapping date range, it will change it into a one date range, right? So you don't want to have overlapping date ranges. So I provided a code example of like what I wrote that does that. And I asked, like I said, can you go over my code example and give me feedback with reasons and then show possible refactors? So this is another way to help you use your ChatGPT buddy as your rubber ducky to think through your code. So I gave an example. So notice how I'm not asking for solutions. I'm asking to teach me things in order to improve my understanding. And so it went ahead and they gave me feedback on my code. Your code seems to be working correctly and has good structure. However, there are some areas where it can be improved. Here's an overview of your code and some suggestions. The create stack function is well implemented, but using stacks for problem is a bit overcomplicated. Why? Because JavaScript already has arrays, and you could literally, why create a whole stack thing if you could just use arrays in JavaScript, and instead of having a stack data type or function, just use arrays, and you can use push and pop. And I did eventually made that refactor a while back. It's just I didn't just check in the code, and then it gave me a bunch of other things and solutions, and then it gave me possible refactor. I didn't copy and paste this, but I went through this. I looked at the code, and I just wanted to make sure I understand what this code is doing and what the improvement, and then it tells me what the refactor does. So that's like another good way to do it. Another way is like error fixing, like talking through errors is like really important. Another cool way that I was using ChatGPT is I wanted to build a learning management kind of proof of concept. I wanted to build a service that like LMS, kind of like Udemy, kind of like Teachable. And so I wanted to kind of have a discussion with ChatGPT to help me think through the problem. And I realized I wasn't sharing my screen. What an idiot I am. Damn, I wasn't sharing my code. Oh, God damn it. I need to go through all that again. Here, I'll just quickly go back. So I talked about, so I don't ask ChatGPT just to give me solutions, but like here was the error that I was talking about where ChatGPT didn't really give me any good solutions here on it, but at least allow me to understand what I wasn't doing correctly. Another thing that I did here is I provided it with a code that I had. Where the hell convert auth here program. So I use it basically to have like a chat with ChatGPT, not to give me solutions, but help me to improve my understanding of problems. And if you're using ChatGPT in that way, you're going to learn faster. And so here's the example that I want to show. So I wrote code a while ago, and I said the following code is how I accomplish this. Can you go over my code example and give me feedback with reasons? And so I provided my code. And again, I'm not asking it to give me solutions. I'm asking it to give me suggestions and improvements and reasons why, because I want to use ChatGPT 3 as a learning tool, and I'll get to questions in just a second, to help me better understand what I'm doing. And so I overcomplicated the code, and it says that your code seems to be working correctly, but however, the reason, some areas it could be improved. Here's an overview and suggestions. Create stack. I created a function that basically implements a stack data structure. In JavaScript, you don't need to do that. Why? Because you have arrays. And I don't know why I didn't use an array, but that's basically what it says. Simplify, just use the array and use the push and pop method. And then it gave me a bunch of other ideas. And again, I didn't copy and paste and use this code. I kind of used the code that I had. I did implement it with arrays only. But this is the way you want to use it, is to give feedback on what you're doing. So if you don't have developer friends, use ChatGPT as your friend to help you learn faster. And another thing, if you're kind of like stuck and you're not sure like what to build, like you could use it to have a conversation to kind of think through a project that you want to build. So here I said, I want to build an LMS software similar to Udemy. Please create specs for a project requirement. So it created me like pretty in-depth specs of what I need to do. And I was like, that's too much. That's not a POC. That's basically a full-fledged application. So, but I did have a follow-up question. So I was like, please expand on the course management in detail and identify minimum functional required to create a step-by-step outline required to complete the task. So again, I'm not looking for solutions, code solutions. I'm going to write the code myself. I just want to have an understanding of what I need to do to make the project. And so it talks about for course creation, blah, 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 what you need to do. And so I took it, I'm like, it's still too complex. So I said, I want to narrow the scope just to focus on the course and lessons. And I said lessons will consist of a video and complementary text description and video transcript. Create a basic database schema that would be required. So I wanted to stay with the data, like start with the data. What does that look like for me? So I went ahead and created like to me the data for me. And then as an experiment, I was like, because I'm using Strappy and we use content types. I'm not going to say that it's 100% it was correct, but it helped and provided that for me if that's the path that I wanted to take, which is kind of awesome, and it helped me out. And then you could continue asking follow-up questions. So the way, if you want to become, and I'll come back to question just a minute, like a better developer, you need to, like, if I had to summarize it in like one sentence, you need to build things from scratch and learn from your mistakes. When you run into issues, yes, there are tools like ChatGPT, Copilot, other tools available. You can use them. Don't use them to get the answer. Use them to gain the understanding of what you need to learn to solve the problem that you have. So it's not give me a fish, but it's teach me how to fish. And continue building things from scratch all the time. Passive learning is doing tutorials. Active learning is writing code, suffering, failing, struggling, talking to your friends, talking to ChatGPT, and actively figuring out the solution. So that's what I would say you would do. So let's come back to the questions. So Jericho said, for example, I started a project based on what I learned in a course. However, when I tried to implement certain features, I encountered difficulties and found myself unable to complete them. That's exactly what I've been talking about this whole stream. This is why instead of going to another course, what you need to do is you need to find the difficulties that you're struggling with, break them into smaller things. So I did a great video of how to solve a Fibonacci recursion issue, and I used ChatGPT to help me. And I used ChatGPT not to give me the solution. I used it to help me understand what I was not understanding. And so the idea is, with the difficult thing that you're having, Jericho, is what you do is you break it down into even smaller things. Like, for instance, like I needed to know what the hell was the prime number. And I'm like, what is the prime number? Let me start there. I know it's like such a dumb example, but sometimes that's what you got to do. Like if you're looking at the code and you don't, it's like, what is the function? I don't know what a function is. Figure out what a function is. Like start in the smallest thing possible and then go through each line to make sure that you understand what everything is doing. And then you'll be able to answer your question. And that's what you have to do. And Jericho, no, it doesn't mean that the course was bad. What means, by the way, is, and I look up additional resources online. Yes, 100%. Yeah. The course is not bad. Things change. And maybe like you made a mistake, and who knows, maybe the course was bad. But this is the key thing that I'm trying to iterate. The course is not going to make you a better programmer. The part that you outline, I look up additional resources online to help me overcome these challenges. Yes, 100%. That's what's going to make you a better developer, is looking those resources online to solve those problems. And agree, at age 45, how to start coding with PVT. I don't know what PVT means. Job, PV. Yeah, I'm not sure, like, if you want to kind of reiterate that. But anyway, like, I want to say thank you, you wonderful, amazing people on YouTube stopping by. If you enjoyed these streams, thanks for liking them. I do these always Fridays, 11 a.m. CST time. We always have a blast. We always have a good time. And remember, I do these streams not just for myself to be like, check out, this is what I'm doing. I do this for being able to like engage with the community. So the more questions you ask, the better. So if you have any last final questions, let me know. And as you know, for every stream, what I've been doing, I've been as a hobby getting involved with music. So I always end the stream with the latest song that I try to write. They're all terrible, but you know what? I'm still learning. And we're speaking about like the reason why like I share sometimes my music and stuff like that. Again, there's this idea in programming called learn in public or code in public. Whatever you're building, whatever you're doing, this is why I say go to meetups, share with people what you're doing, go to communities on Discord, share what you're doing, go on Twitter and be like, hey, I'm building this thing with React, tag React, and start a conversation about thing and show people that you're actively building stuff. Now, Jericho, thank you so much. No, I appreciate you, my man. I appreciate all of you. I do these streams because, look, I started learning to code at 35, got my first job at 39. And the hardest thing for me was having YouTubers to paint a realistic picture of how hard coding is. Coding is not easy, like the way people make it sound. It's hard. hard. Why do you know, it's the nature of it, and it will take time. There's no shortcuts. There are better learning strategies that you could use that will make you feel like there's a shortcut, but there's no shortcuts. You need to know what you're doing. And so I have this YouTube channel to kind of bring people back to reality who are learning to code, because I don't want someone to quit coding because like, oh, they said I'll get a job in 3 months and then it didn't work for them and they quit. No, it doesn't take, it takes a while. It takes a long time. And the best strategy is just continue doing what you're doing. Try to have a feedback cycle where you're getting feedback like, hey, this is not working for me. What I need to do, like, what do I need to improve on to continue moving forward? And again, make sure you have that narrow path. You can't try to do everything. Make sure you have that narrow path to guide you where you're going, and then don't give up and you get there. And so my point for this channel is to make sure that I share my experience. Like, I'm not a guru, I'm not an expert. I just want to talk about my experience of how I got into coding and lessons learned. And if they help you to stay on track, not give up, and get to where you're going, that is amazing. So with that being said, you know, I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. And thank you again for all the amazing conversation. Jericho was here. Sorry if I can't pronounce the name. Sharon, Jason was here. All the amazing people, all the amazing. Shiam was here. Shikar was here. Anish, like Tyler was here. Logic was here. All the amazing people. So for this, like, want to thank you all, and I'll see you in the next one. And so I will leave you with my newest song, a video. I hope you enjoy. Take care. Love you all. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.